Okay, with Congressman Latham this morning. Congressman Latham, I just wanted to ask you how are things going with the race so far, and what are some things are you expecting in tonight's debate?
Well, the race is going extremely well. We've been working 24/7. We've got a great group of volunteers out there that, and as you just saw, we gave an award to an individual who had made 25,000 calls, voter contacts on the phone. But no, it's going extremely well. We're going to work extremely hard and all the way to the end, but we feel very good about it. The debate tonight should be interesting, and that it'll be Congressman Boswell, along with the Socialist Party member, and one who got on by petition onto the ballot along with myself. So there'll be four of us involved. It's pretty hard to know what to expect in that kind of a format, but I always look forward to it, a good discussion about the issues and about pointing out, I think, differences between the candidates.
Okay, great. Should you be sent back to Washington, what would be your number one goal?
Well, I think that obviously the jobs, the economy, debt, all of those things are extraordinarily important to Iowans. When we look at the $16 trillion of debt, we've got to have a dramatic change, long-term direction for this country. And that means addressing the mandatory spending in the budget, having tax policy that encourages job growth, getting this economy going again, to have certainty for the people who are the job creators, the small business people out there as far as taxes and regulations. But that's what the main emphasis is going to be going back. In the lame duck session, obviously there are big issues to deal with before the end of the year as far as extending the current tax law, as far as the sequestration that is going to go into effect on January 2nd. Pretty devastating as far as the military and as far as other domestic programs.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know President Obama would like to extend the tax cuts for just the middle class, but increase taxes for what he says are millionaires, but really goes down to $250,000 a year. What are your thoughts on making the rich pay a little bit more?
Well, this doesn't affect the rich. It affects people who actually earn money.
Okay.
Because what he's talking about is taxing at a higher rate earned income. So the Warren Buffetts of the world, the Bill Gates of the world are still going to pay the same rate because there is passive income, whether it be capital gains or dividend income. Mm-hmm. There's no change for those folks. But the small business people, subchapter S's out there that maybe had a good year and would like to take that good year and invest it in their business, they're the ones that are going to be penalized. It's not the rich. Okay. These are the productive people in our society that he wants to target.
All right. Now you mentioned debt reduction as a goal. What can we do as far as where do you think we can make some legitimate spending cuts?
Well, certainly the number one issue to me. And you can look, and as I chair a subcommittee on appropriations, and we had the highest percentage of spending reductions of any of the appropriation bills coming out on my bill this year. And so you have to look at each program, evaluate them for how they're worth. But I would much rather reform the way the federal government works. I've got a bill called the Less Government Act, which actually would put in place government-wide practices that have been extraordinarily successful as far as efficiency in the private sector, and apply it to government. And we could save at least 25% of the administrative costs, which is hundreds of billions of dollars, just by providing the service in an effective way coming out of the government.
Okay. Now, I had a reader ask me, why did you vote in favor of cash for clunkers? And
that goes back with the auto dealers came in, were desperate. There were no sales. They thought that was would be of assistance. Looking back on it, it probably was not a good vote. But
a clunker vote?
Huh?
A clunker vote?
Well, clunker, whatever. No, but it was really by the people on the ground here. And this is when the auto dealers, if you remember, we're under siege from the administration as far as shutting down dealerships everywhere. And basically the government picking winners and losers as to which dealers are going to stay open, which ones are we going to close.
Okay.
And they were absolutely desperate as far as some way of trying to help. And I said, listen, I don't like this, but I'll try to help you.
Okay. Now, what's your philosophy on other types of social welfare and bailouts? How would you approach those?
Well, we've got to make sure that we provide the services in the federal government that actually will work, and but it cannot be a permanent entitlement, and that's, I think, what people are concerned about with a huge increase in number of people that are on food stamps. You've got in July of this year, you had more people signing up for Social Security disability than people that got jobs. I mean, this is when their unemployment benefits run out, that people will actually go to a doctor and say, I have anxiety, and the doctor will write a letter, and they will automatically, permanently get on Social Security, and they're then subject and eligible for Medicare or the health care. We've got to get the economy going, and that is what will actually help people, because they don't want this, but they're desperate. And if you're, in the late 50s, early 60s, it's sometimes more difficult to find a job, which is wrong, but it's true for a lot of people. And so that's what they're resorting to.
So, what can the Congress do to stimulate the economy?
There is tremendous uncertainty in the economy today, which is the biggest problem we have. There's no confidence because people don't know what their tax rates are going to be next year, where the capital gains tax rates are going to go up, their marginal tax rates are going to go up, dividends are going to go up from 15% to whatever your marginal tax rate is. You can't plan your estate. There's death tax, alternative minimum tax will affect another 20 million people if nothing's done by the end of the year. And with that uncertainty, with all of the new regulations that are coming out of Washington today, are just, people are scared to death. They're not investing. They're not putting anything at risk. They're not buying new equipment. They're not hiring more people. I had visited a business yesterday. They've got 48 employees, and he's not going above that, because if he gets to 50, then a lot of new additional federal mandates come in and regulations that he'd have to comply with, which he could not afford to do. So he is stopped in his tracks right now because of the federal government.
Yeah, business regulations and deregulation was brought up in, I think it was last night's debate, or maybe it was the last one. What regulations need to be killed?
Well, I've got a bill to reform the regulatory process. Number one, you'd have a commission that would go back and look at all the brush that's there and try to clear that out. Stuff that is antiquated, some is not necessary, is not working, to actually reform that. And then also going forward, if you have a proposed regulation that is significant, which means it's $100 million effect on the economy or more, the agency would have to provide the real numbers as to how they came to the justification for that new regulation. Right now, the private sector who's affected is shut out from the process of how the new regulations are developed. To have transparency, to give the people that are going to be regulated an opportunity to actually evaluate to see if they used real numbers, if it is going to have the desired effect, and evaluate it. And then on these significant regulations, Congress should have to vote up or down on these, because they have a huge, dramatic, and oftentimes a very, very negative impact on the economy and on job creation, certainly. And there's no responsibility in Congress. The most dangerous words, I think, in any piece of legislation is the secretary shall determine, because oftentimes Congress doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of how you're going to administer something. And that has been like a license for this administration, certainly, to expand the authorities in a lot of different, with the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Dodd-Frank, all of these things that are so difficult for small business to comply with.
Sure. Last night, Iowa was brought up in the debate on talking about green energy and energy alternatives. Do you think we need to continue with wind tax credits?
Well, I've worked very closely with the Wind Energy Association, and yes, I think we have to continue it now. And what I've been working with them on is, and they're to the point they're going to have a proposal here. I think after the election it'll be public, but a phase out of the credit. And just cutting it off right now as far as any new investment credits has been very detrimental. Obviously, there's job losses here and across the country because of the lack of certainty for the wind tax credit, the production tax credit going forward. But they understand that it's not sustainable long term. It's just how you transition away from the credit. And that's what they're looking for, is certainty again, so that they will know what their investment is. Their biggest competition is cheap natural gas today. So the whole dynamics, the economic picture of how this is going to work has changed with the advent of all of the new gas that's been found.
Now, ethanol subsidies, do we continue those?
Well, there's no direct subsidies on ethanol anymore.
Okay.
That was done away with. Now, their issue is to make sure that we keep standards in place which will continue a market for ethanol, for other biorenewable fuels. And I think that will continue, certainly as far as the standards are concerned. But there are no, there used to be a blender's credit and all that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's all been done away
Okay,
with.
all right. With last night, they're talking about oil production, and the Obama administration claims that oil production has increased under his administration. True, false?
He's absolutely he's talking about on federal land, okay, which the federal government controls. Production is down all across the board, whether gas, oil. Where there's been a huge increase in production has been on state-controlled land and on private lands that the federal government doesn't control. But he has, in fact, given about 50% fewer permits on federal lands for exploration than what the previous administration did. So for him to say somehow that he's been responsible for the increase of production of energy is just outrageous in my mind. And it certainly is not true, because they've shut down the Keystone Pipeline. They are not issuing permits. They're trying to now, EPA is trying to regulate much more heavily production of energy in this country, trying to shut it down. They've done everything they can to stand in the way of energy independence in this country.
So if we were to have a perfect scenario, we get all the the energy policies passed that you'd like to see passed, what would that look like?
Well, you would have a situation where you would actually have a friendly federal government that understands that it's the national security interest for the United States to be energy independent, so that we don't have to be over in the Middle East, we don't have to be involved in that part of the world, we don't have to spend hundreds of billions of dollars every year to keep those oil lanes open to transport oil out of the Middle East, and the lives, obviously, that are involved. But what we need to do is have a policy where we can go after the vast resources we have for oil, natural gas, all the renewable energy, whether you talk about ethanol or soy diesel, biodiesel, wind, solar. When you look at nuclear energy, is the cleanest way of producing electricity is nuclear, and that would be a huge part of it. But we've also got to understand that it's our responsibility, and we should put great emphasis on conservation, so that we don't waste this finite resource that we have as far as the oil and gas and the different energy sources.
So open up ANWR to
Absolutely.
Okay. Shifting gears a little bit toward foreign policy, how should we respond to the attack in Libya? Do you feel like the Obama administration has done everything they can or should do?
Well, in Libya, obviously, we haven't gotten the whole story from this administration about what actually happened in was obviously a terrorist attack that they denied for weeks and weeks afterwards, and said it was some kind of a reaction to this film that was made. It, to me, is they've lost all credibility. It's unfortunate, I think, with this administration, they send mixed signals to everybody. They're not sending a true message today of who they're with in Libya, and we're seeing the real radical elements stepping up, and like the attack that happened that killed our ambassador and 3 other great Americans that were lost on September 11th this year. I don't see any policy coming out of this administration towards Libya. It's just like around the world today, the idea, and they publicly said, talking about Libya, that we're going to lead from behind. That's not the United States role. We are the #1 power in the world. We are what people look to for leadership, for direction, and that's why I think it's really harmful to our national interests that we have someone who really has no plan.
Should facts made known, we know exact, and we find out who was behind the attacks, should there be a military response?
Well, it's any way possible to bring them to justice. How that is done, I'll leave to the experts, but certainly if in fact those people can be isolated, they need to be pay the price.
Should we have any involvement in what's going on in Syria?
In Syria, I think we should stand up as a nation and make a clear statement that we support the people who are trying to get rid of Assad. I mean, he is a very, very obviously brutal dictator in that part of the world, and he's the best friends with Iran, which obviously is a stated enemy of the United States along with Israel. But we should have a very clear statement as to who we're with. We've had kind of mixed messages so far, and that's, again, that's what causes a lot of problems if in fact you don't lead.
Yeah, along the same lines, we got Iran, and that's obviously a big concern in the Middle East with their nuclear program. It sounds like as though we're letting Israel take the lead on what should be done. If Israel decides to bomb, do we support Israel in that?
Absolutely. I mean, Israel is our closest ally in the whole Middle East. We've had a very unique bond with Israel since its inception, and absolutely we need to support them. And the Iran, Israel has very good intelligence, and they will know when it's time, when we have to do it to stop them from getting nuclear capabilities. The fact of the matter is Iran will use that capability.
Yeah.
And that's what is really scary, not just on Israel, but their plan is to destroy the United States also.
Well, it's been, and I've heard the administration or surrogates say that they're not to the point where they can weaponize it yet, even if they did enrich uranium. But nobody's talking about a possibly dirty bomb capability with Hezbollah, which to me that's a greater concern right now, because they could take that anywhere. So, Afghanistan, is it time to start drawing down and pulling out?
If in fact we don't have a clear mission in Afghanistan, which I don't think we have, other than next year we're going to withdraw. I think if that's the case, if there's no strategy for victory, if you can't define what that would look like, you just will bring them home tomorrow. Because we have men and women in harm's way over there, and the rules of engagement that they are forced to comply with is very, very difficult for them to be in a fight. I mean, when you take somebody off the battlefield and you have to read them their rights, when you can only respond when attacked, things like that get people killed. And we're seeing this new strategy of inserting radicals into the security forces and killing Americans, murdering them. No, I think without a clear strategy, we should be out of there. We can, with covert operations, with the capabilities that we have today, we can find out where the enemies are and take them out without putting American soldiers men and women in.
There are some in Republican circles who would say that we shouldn't have any military action without a formal declaration of war. Do you agree with that? Disagree?
Well, it's we have authorized the use of lethal force in both in Iraq and in Afghanistan. There's no challenge as far as constitutionally that when the president has come to us and actually did do the authorization for it. So
Okay.
I would much rather have a declaration of war. That would be much clearer, yes.
Sure.
But in the case of like Al-Qaeda, yeah,
Who do you declare war on?
who do you declare? Yeah, there's no country. You can't. That's.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Totally shifting gears again, bringing it back home. No Child Left Behind reauthorization. It's been interesting to watch the two campaigns talk about education when it's come up in debates and in different speeches, and they both have obviously a different plan. President Obama has really pushed his Race to the Top program and their support of the Common Core state standards. President Romney, or excuse me, Governor Romney, Freudian slip there. Governor Romney, he stated that he's not in favor of national standards, but he would much rather help bolster school choice. And what do you think a proper federal role in education? What should that look like? What is that?
Well, I think the No Child Left Behind was an experiment at the greatest intentions. It hasn't worked because of the way it was implemented, and I just think we've come to the point where we need to certainly our obligations with disabled children, whether you want to help as far as Title I, giving some resources there, but to have the federal government try to dictate what curriculum is at the local level, what they can and cannot do, and the local school districts get maybe 5 or 6, 7% of their revenue from the federal government, but about 70 to 80% of the regulations come from the federal government. They're very expensive and cumbersome to deal with.
What are your thoughts on they doubled down on Race to the Top, and now they're doing district level Race to the Top, where school districts can directly apply for funds? Do you think that's...
Well, it dramatically expands the role of the federal government. They're going to be writing grant applications for the rules that come out of Washington rather than what the needs are at home. And that to me is of great concern. And we have a lot of very, very smart people who know how to write grants, applications, and I'm not sure that, with the idea of the money hanging out there that they can go after. I really think that we've got to bring the power and control back to the state and certainly the local school district. That has been the strength of education in Iowa ever since they were settled here in Iowa. The first thing they did was build a church. The second thing, when they settled, they built a school. And that priority should stay the same.
Good. What are some specific bills that are just kind of hanging out there in limbo that could be decided and voted on that would help promote the pro-life cause that you would support?
Well, certainly through all the appropriation bills to make sure that the Mexico City policy stays in place, that we're not spending money on giving money to other countries for abortions, for us paying for abortions. The pro-life bills, that's basically where the focus is as far as funding for abortion coverage. Certainly with the President's health care bill, the repeal of that, which has been an assault on religious liberty as far as mandating to people who have moral objections to certainly abortion, contraceptives, things like that the federal government now is mandating that somebody that morally is objecting to it, they pay for it, and that's wrong, and we've got to repeal that.
Okay. And last question, there's been a lot of talk about, reforming Social Security and Medicare, and then also with Obamacare, they're saying repeal it and replace, but I guess I'm throwing several questions at you at once. What are some practical things we could do to reform Social Security and then also Medicare?
Well, without getting really into specifics on
Sure.
Social Security, but when you look back when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did the last reform of Social Security that extended the life of the program considerably, that's the same kind of bipartisan effort that we're going to have, because these problems are too big for any one party. You're going to have consensus. And the big problem with the president's health care bill, it was jammed through on total party lines, all Democrats, no Republicans. And that's why it's going to be very difficult for it to ever work, because you don't have broad support for something. So, you need to virtually sit down, have the debate, put people over politics and progress over partisanship, and get something done. And the same with saving Medicare. There is a much more immediate concern, certainly with Medicare going bankrupt. And we've got to have a system that's not only here for the folks in the system, those coming in the next few years, all the baby boomers that are coming in. We have 10,000 people a day signing up for Social Security and Medicare. This is going to go on for decades.
Okay. Well, some ideas have been floating around. I mean, Medicare block grant to the states?
Not Medicare.
Or
They're talking about
Medicaid, excuse me.
All the governors, basically, on a bipartisan basis across the country, would love to have the flexibility to design programs for their states. What they're talking about is to have the money go to the states with guaranteed increases as far as people in the system, but also increase in funding, and have each governor, each state legislature design what is a state program, in essence, with Medicaid. And they currently are very tight restrictions from the federal government as to what they have to cover.
Okay. Now with Social Security, the vouchers for younger people, where they can, that's an idea that's been floating out there.
Vouchers for younger people?
Or not private, well, giving them the ability to buy into or retirement that they would like to do.
Well, any kind of proposal on Social Security has to be brought into the mix. I know I'm totally opposed to privatizing Social Security.
Okay.
And that simply would be wrong. I would never support that.
Okay.
But everything else, in my mind, should be discussed. It should be brought there and have a bipartisan consensus as to how to go forward. But Medicare is really the one is the big issue right now, as far as virtually immediate bankruptcy.
Last question, I promise.
Okay.
With replacing Obamacare, I mean, what are some ideas that you like that we could replace it with?
Well, the things everybody agrees on, has always agreed on, as far as pre-existing conditions, having people have access to it, taking off the catastrophic, the caps, when you have a catastrophic illness, that should not put you in bankruptcy. And certainly, as far as young people, if the parents decide they want to keep their kid on the policy, that's fine through college. Everyone basically agreed with that. But what I believe that we need to do going forward, and the way you're going to save money and actually improve services, is to introduce competition. In Washington, that's something that a lot of people don't understand, that actually a free enterprise system that has made us the greatest, strongest country in the world actually works. It holds down costs. It makes people compete, offering more services at a lower price. And when you talk about being able to purchase policies across state lines, have small businesses nationwide be able to pool together to have leverage in negotiating with insurance companies as far as group policy plans. Medical malpractice reform is absolutely critical. There's about $50 billion a year that you could save by doing away the defensive medicine that is practiced today, so that you can, when you get sued, you've got to go to, you go to court, and there's some good lawyer is going to go through and say, well, you didn't do this. Well, so what the doctors unfortunately are saying, well, we're going to do every test possible, and even though we know they aren't necessary, just because we might have to defend ourselves in court someday. Things like that would actually make sense, that we could provide services efficiently at a lower cost. The problem with healthcare is the high cost. And the president said that it would lower healthcare costs. Well, that's false. It's actually increased healthcare premiums because of the president's bill. And when you look at the cuts to Medicare that are in the healthcare bill, that's $616 billion. The Medicare trustees just came out and said that in this decade, 15% of the hospitals in this country will no longer take Medicare patients. By the next decade, 25% of the hospitals will no longer take Medicare patients, let alone what it does as far as nursing home services, home health care, therapists that come into the home to help people. Those services are going to be very, very rare to find for a Medicare patient, if in fact their plan is allowed to be done as they're proposing or as it's been passed.
Okay, well, thank you, Congressman Latham. Thank you very much for
You
your time.
bet. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.